We now come to the urgent question. Munira Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the Secretary of State if she will make a statement on support for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities.
Minister.
Every child deserves the opportunity to achieve and thrive, but at the moment, far from every child is being given that chance. Today's report by the National Audit Office is sadly bang on the money. This is a system that has totally lost the confidence of families. Families and children with SEND are being failed on every measure. Even ministers opposite have admitted that they should hang their heads in shame at the failure to, shadow ministers opposite should hang their heads in shame at the failure to support children with special educational needs. Our promise to families is that we are absolutely committed to regain parents' confidence in the special educational needs and disabilities system. But it is a huge and complex reform, and there is no magic wand, there is no quick fix. So as we continue to ask for patience, as we work as quickly as we can to make the changes I know families are crying out for, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We've published independently commissioned insight today that suggests that if the system was extensively improved, using early intervention and better resourcing in mainstream schools, it could lead to tens of thousands more children and young people having their needs met without an EHCP, and having their needs met in a mainstream setting rather than in a specialist placement. This can pave the way for a sustainable system where schools cater for all children and where special schools cater only for those with the most complex needs. Our plans include strengthening accountability on mainstream settings to be inclusive, including through Ofsted, and supporting the mainstream workforce to have SEND expertise. What's clear is that we need to work with teachers, parents, children, therapists and councils who for so long have been trying but have been set up to fail by a broken system. And this work forms part of the government's opportunity mission, which will break the unfair link between background and opportunity, starting with giving every child, including those with special educational needs and disabilities, the best start in life.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent question today. Today's report from the National Audit Office has confirmed what parents, carers, children and young people across the country have been telling us for years, that our system to support those with special educational needs and disabilities is in crisis and on the brink. The previous Conservative government's abject failure to tackle the systemic problems facing SEND provision have been laid bare for all to see. With half of children waiting more than the statutory 20 weeks for an education, health and care plan, outcomes not improving, special schools over capacity, and damningly the Department for Education not knowing how much capacity is needed to meet future need, we are failing our most vulnerable children. Shockingly, 43% of councils stand at risk of bankruptcy given the deficits they are racking up in their high needs budget. This is a nationwide issue, Mr. Speaker, and colleagues across this House have been inundated, like me, with casework from concerned and often desperate parents. Those parents just want to know their children will get the support they need without waiting months or years. What this report makes clear is the urgent need for whole system reform with joined-up thinking across local and national government, the NHS and schools. So could the Minister please give us a clear timeline for the full reform called for by the NAO, including whether she will consider Liberal Democrat proposals for a new national body for SEND to support children with the most complex needs to tackle the postcode lottery? What steps is she taking to incentivise early intervention, including training specialists for assessments and reducing the contributions that schools have to make before they can apply for an EHCP? What is she doing to speed up the building of state special schools, with local authorities spending a staggering £2 billion on independent special schools? And is she pressing the Chancellor for an urgent cash injection in next week's budget so we can start cleaning up this mess?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her raising this issue and for bringing it in front of the House today. She is absolutely right to draw attention to the National Audit Office report and the damning indictment that it has made of the system that has lost the confidence of families and that is failing children with special educational needs and disabilities. She rightly calls for the system to be reformed, and that is what this government is absolutely focused on and determined to do. It is one of the first differences we made on coming into office to move the special educational needs and disabilities remit within the schools sector to ensure that the vision that we see of mainstream inclusive education for all children that will benefit from it, whilst having the specialist schools that we know children with the most complex needs can have their needs met in, is not being delivered. It is not a reality for far too many families, and it's a reality that we urgently need to see to address not only the local authority deficits that she rightly refers to, but also to create better outcomes for children. Because at the moment, not only is this a system that is costing a significant amount to the Treasury, and she tempts me into anticipating announcements ahead of next week's budget statement, and she will know that is not something I can do. But she is right to identify that this is costing increasingly amounts of money, but is not delivering the outcomes that children deserve and that families want to see. So we are absolutely determined to reform this system. We are working at pace. All the changes that we have made since coming into office are to that end. We have launched the curriculum and assessment review that will help to support a broad and inclusive education for all children. We have made changes to Ofsted, and those changes are continuing at pace to ensure that we have a system that takes into account the whole school life and journey, and that includes creating an inclusive environment for children with special educational needs. But most of all, we are determined to restore parents' trust in our education system, that if their child has special educational needs, they will be identified early, because we know that early identification is key. They will be supported, which is why we're continuing to support early language and speech intervention and to prioritise the rollout of training for early years workforce on special educational needs to ensure those needs can be identified at the earliest point necessary. We are expanding our childcare system to ensure that more children can get into those settings as early as possible so that any needs can be identified also, and that we can rebuild that trust that every child in our state sector will get the opportunities that they should have of a fantastic education, regardless of any additional special educational needs or disabilities.
Chair of the Select Committee, Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The National Audit Office report could not be clearer. Children, young people and their families are being failed by a SEND system which cannot meet their needs, and local authorities are being driven to the edge of a financial precipice by a £3.4 billion funding gap. This government has inherited an appalling legacy. The government is clear that its focus is on early identification of need and inclusivity of mainstream schools, but the report notes that there is currently no process or funding to support early identification and no specific funding or Ofsted measure on SEND support or inclusivity. Can the Minister say more about how the government will provide the resources and the levers of accountability to address the scale of the crisis?
But can we all please look to the chair? We're working in the third person, not through the Minister. So please look through the chair. Then I can hear and I can help the situation. Minister. This will be a good example.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for her question, and welcome to her place as Chair of the Education Select Committee, which I know will undertake vital work in scrutinising the government and its approach on this and many other issues. We know that wider change is needed. which is why we have started to make these improvements as quickly as possible. The changes that I outlined in my response to the Honourable Lady's question of a whole system change to ensure that we have that inclusive mainstream education that the National Audit Office has identified will provide the education that we know many children deserve and are not currently receiving. But it will take time, and we won't be making promises that we can't keep. There are some things we can move on very quickly. There are others that will take time to show that the change that the NAO report highlights is desperately needed will take time. And so we have asked for patience while we make these changes that are incredibly urgent.
Mr. James Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for securing the question, and we welcome the NAO report. Every member will regularly be dealing with constituent send cases, and the growing demand is why we put in place major increases in funding to ensure children get the support they need. The last government worked with the sector on comprehensive reforms, but since the election we've heard very little from the government about what they actually plan to do in terms of reform. So we look for more clarity, and we certainly support greater inclusivity. With too much variation in the system and parents often having to battle to get the support, does the government plan to continue with our national standards and bring forward a standardised approach to EHCPs? Over 100,000 pupils with special educational needs are educated in independent schools without EHCPs. How does the Minister think hitting those pupils with a 20% education tax and seeing more pupils move into the state sector as a result will help pressures on schools? And what assessment has she made of the increase in EHC applications that this will also generate, putting further burdens on local authorities? Can she confirm that the acts that the Education Secretary has got above new free schools does not apply to free special schools? And finally, council budgets are under huge pressure. So is the Minister making the argument to the Treasury to extend the statutory override beyond the March 2026 date or not?
So, as I said, one of the first acts of the Education Secretary was to reorganise the department to make sure that the SEND team sits within our school team and it is not separate from it. And this talks to the vision that we have for reform, which speaks of our whole education system to create that inclusive mainstream education that we know will provide the best opportunities for the maximum amount of children and keep children as far as is possible with special educational needs and disabilities within the mainstream system with their friends. That's why we've launched the Curriculum and Assessment Review. We need to look closely at the key challenges to attainment for young people and the barriers that are holding them back from accessing the current mainstream education system. We're working with Ofsted to introduce the report cards to look at how inclusion can be reflected as part of how schools are monitored by Ofsted. We're also increasing training for early years providers. We've extended the Nuffield Early Language Intervention Programme to make sure that no child's needs are missed out and that every child can find their voice. But we've been very clear, full reform will take time. But nothing is off the table to make sure that every child with SEND can achieve and thrive in mainstream schools. And we've also started making changes in terms of legislation, the Children's Wellbeing Bill, which will get introduced in the coming months. On the point he made about private schools, ending tax breaks on private schools will help raise the revenue to fund our education priorities for next year, including recruiting 6,500 new teachers. And as he knows, Treasury is consulting on plans to enable the changes to come into force in January and how to design those plans to make sure that no child with special educational needs on Education, Health and Care Plan will be adversely affected. And in terms of the free schools, the review that was announced this week relates only to mainstream free schools, and we are starting a process with local authorities and trusts with the mainstream schools that are in scope, with a strong focus on assessing that need to make sure that school places are in the local area where they should be, and that it also aligns with our vision for mainstream inclusive education for every child that needs it.
Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, nearly 5% of children in Hackney have an EHCP, and that doesn't account for the others who have special educational needs. But with schools closing, we have an opportunity to create alternative provision for schools, like the poor head teacher I spoke to the other week who has more than a third of her reception class now with special educational needs, most not identified before starting school. So there is a need for a different vision. Would she meet with me and people from Hackney or visit Hackney to see what we could do with spare school spaces to try and motor this forward faster than is possible nationally?
I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her question, and she rightly identifies the need to ensure that we have the right school places for the children that meets their needs in the places where that need is not being met or not being served in the most productive way possible. And we are open to meeting with honourable members to discuss in their area where this can best be achieved. And of course, I'd be happy to meet with her to discuss this further.
Then Obese-Jecty.
In Cambridgeshire, the County Council is failing to meet the conditions of the Dedicated Schools Grant Safety Valve Agreement, with only 5% of EHCPs granted within the 20-week timeframe, the average in England being 49%. Families in my constituency are facing huge challenges in ensuring that their children's education is not disrupted or negatively impacted. How does the government plan to address these unacceptable delays?
He is right to identify these challenges, and it is why the National Audit Office has made the analysis it has that is published today, that the current system is not working and it is not serving the needs of children and their families in the way that they should. That is why we are looking to review the situation, review the current system in a wholesale way, and we are moving at pace to do that. And obviously the changes that I've outlined will help to support. But in addition, for example, we will be legislating to ensure that local authorities are able to properly plan for places and admissions in their area and make sure that every school, regardless of how they're established, every state school has to cooperate in ensuring that those places are there for children who need them. And so we will make a whole range of changes, which I've outlined, which will seek to address the very problem that he outlines.
Grahame Morris.
Thank you very thanks, Chris. Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm in absolutely no doubt that the Labour government has a terrible inheritance on SEND provision, but children in my constituency in Easington who rely on services provided by the Tees, Esk and Weir Valley NHS Trust are facing unreasonably long waiting times, incredibly up to 5 years for assessments for autism, ADHD and other related conditions. Can the Minister tell me what steps she's taking to reduce these unacceptably long waiting lists and support both the children and their families during these lengthy waits for assessments?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and would reiterate that not only has this government inherited a terrible legacy on special educational needs and disabilities, but on our public spending and the state of our public services overall. And this is a really important example that he raises of the importance of working cross-government to resolve and support the families that need support, whether that is through education means, which obviously my department is responsible for, or indeed through the health service as well, and to work collaboratively across government to address the huge backlogs that we know far too many people are facing in getting the support we need. I can rest assure him that this is a priority for us.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last 2 weeks, I have met with 2 families whose children are both suicidal. One of those children is 9 years old. The other one was committed to a secure unit for most of 2023. And the cause of their suicidal thoughts is that their educational needs have not been met by the education system. Neither of those children have got EHCPs, and currently West Sussex County Council, which is Conservative controlled, is only completing 9.4% of EHCPs within 20 weeks. A blocker of this is the lack of educational psychologists. Does the Minister agree that increasing that supply of educational psychologists is essential?
I'm so sorry to hear about the case that she raises, and she highlights very well the huge challenge that we face in addressing these needs, not only in ensuring that we have the mainstream inclusive education system that every child who should feels they belong in and that will provide the education that they need, but also that we have the mental health support that we know is sadly lacking, and the waiting lists are too long for far too many children and families. That's why we are prioritising investing and ensuring the mental health support is available in schools, and also ensuring that we have educational psychologists. And this is an area that we are prioritising because we know how important it is to get that right support in place to help not only the families and individuals affected, but to give schools the ability to address these needs as well.
Rosie Wrighting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After today's shocking report, does the Minister agree with me that we need to rebuild the SEND system from the ground up?
I thank my honourable friend for her question, and she's absolutely right. This is change that needs to be delivered in conjunction with the teachers, with the families, with the councils, with the educational psychologists, with the health sector. We need to work together to ensure that that support is available at every stage, and it does need reform, and it needs significant change. We can't carry on as we are with this lose-lose-lose system that is letting far too many families down.
Alicia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister kindly advise whether the Government is surging support to local authorities to help them process and complete EHCPs within the statutory timeframes? Because in my communities we're seeing a significant increase in applications because of the decision to impose VAT on independent schools. I have 3 SEND schools. The honourable members opposite may shout, but this is the reality that my councils are facing. So I'm asking for urgent support today to support those councils who are having to face these increased numbers.
So, as you know, we've been very clear in terms of our manifesto commitment and our approach within government that a priority for us is to ensure we have the investment that we need to put into our schools to make sure that every child has the teaching and the school experience that they deserve. We know that councils are facing significant challenges in processing and delivering for children with special educational needs after 14 years of a system that is letting families and children down, that the former Secretary of State for Education herself described as lose, lose, lose. This is the legacy that we are dealing with. This is the mess that we are clearing up, but we are determined to do it for the families and the children that we know deserve better than what they've had.
Martin Sewards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, today's report confirms what many parents in my constituency, Leeds South West and Morley, have been telling me since long before the election. The SEND system in this country is failing. Now, as a secondary school maths teacher, I know all too well that SEND provision is not up to scratch, and I have seen firsthand as both parents and children have lost hope that after 14 years of negligence by the party opposite, they would ever see an improvement in the system from the SEND crisis. So, as a result of that, will the Minister confirm that there is, although there is no silver bullet, we must improve the SEND system and we must give people hope that it will improve?
Can I just say to everybody, look, this is going to run till about 11:30-ish. So if I'm going to get everybody in, we're going to have to speed up on questions and answers. I want to try and get as many as possible. It's too much, a very important subject to all of us. Minister.
Speaker, thank you. And it is understandable that a huge number of members of this House want to raise this concern. It really is an appalling legacy that we have inherited of failure on this front. We have prioritised this. We are absolutely determined to fix it, and it will take time, which the honourable gentleman recognised. But we are moving at pace to fix this broken system.
Other chance.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parents and teachers in North Herefordshire tell me how concerned they are that special educational needs funding has stagnated for the last 10 years, while the needs have increased. I visited Westfield School in my constituency, which is in desperate need of capital investment. They were allocated funding under the school's rebuilding programme, but I understand that programme has been very slow in the implementation. Can the Minister assure me that she remains committed to the school's rebuilding programme, that it's on track, and that she will amend the way the funding system works to incentivise mainstream inclusion?
I can absolutely assure the Honourable Lady in respect of her final question that we are absolutely determined that mainstream inclusion is prioritised and that we ensure that schools are supported and that we have the framework in place that encourages, incentivises and supports schools to do what we know will create the best outcomes for the vast majority of children in this country, which is that they are included within a mainstream system that will ensure that they can thrive.
Yeah. Amanda Barton.
Speaker, given today's report and the shocking and devastating impact that the reality has on children, young people and their families, Mr Speaker, what message does the Minister have for the children and young people with SEND and their families in my constituency of Portsmouth North?
We recognise how challenging this situation is for many families who are not getting the support they need with their special educational needs or disabilities. We know the system is broken. The National Audit Office report today lays it out bare. We are determined to fix this, and that is the message I want to send.
Richard Holden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Within 5 months of entering office, this government will abolish will introduce VAT on independent schools, with all the impact that might have for the state sector. How long are we going to have to wait for an actual plan for SEND children, rather than just the political posturing around VAT?
The changes that we have set out and are determined to make are all aimed at improving the situation that we have inherited after 14 years of neglect and decline under the previous government. I have set out at length all of the changes that we seek to make, both through legislation and the changes we have already made to our education system to make sure that it is inclusive, mainstream, with high and rising standards and opportunities for all.
Durham Puffy.
Today's report is damning but not surprising. It is an indictment of the former government and the 14 years that they failed. And even today, they shamelessly deflect and gaslight the very families that they have failed. Mr Speaker, independent SEND provision is growing in Southampton, Itchen and across the country. And while those places are needed, it does leave councils at the mercy of market price and often, for residential care, venture capitalists. This is wrong. Does the Minister agree with me that as part of that whole system reform, we must return to basics and that profiteering from SEND is the wrong approach? And would she meet with me and my constituents to hear what they want to see out of this whole system reform?
My honourable friend raises an important challenge and one that we are determined to address, that we have the mainstream inclusive education within our state school system that every child should have access to and thrive in, but that where we need those specialist places for children with complex needs, and that is only where their needs can be met, that we have those places also, and that we have a system that is not only best serving the needs of children, but is sustainable as well for the future. So I'll take away his comments, and that will be part of our thinking as we go ahead.
Sarah Green.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Other members have asked already about educational psychologists, and we know that there's a real shortage right now. Is the department or the government considering enabling other professionals to undertake some of those assessments to help unblock those waiting lists?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question and the constructive way in which she puts it. I will take it away in terms of considering how that would fit into our broader plans of making sure we have an education system that can meet the needs of children in terms of both their educational requirements and their mental health and special educational needs and disabilities requirements, and within a broader health system that can meet those needs as well.
Alex McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Far too many families in my constituency in Gloucester have come to me in tears at not just the lack of support for their children with SEND, but also a system that seems set up to stop them getting that support. How many appeals are successful in that? Because they should be getting through on the first time round and they feel like they're being let down by the system. So can the Secretary of State the Minister, please ensure that the system that we reform is one that doesn't make families have to fight to get the support their children so desperately need? Thank you.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. This system is letting down families, it is letting down children, it is creating a situation where not only are their educational outcomes impacted by the poor response, but too many families' lives are affected by just trying to deal with the system. That is why we are determined to reform it. And if we can have inclusive mainstream schools that are meeting the demands, the evidence shows very clearly it will reduce the need for education, health and care plans and reduce the need for families to go through this process in the first place.
Bradley Thomas.
What additional resources will the Government provide to Worcestershire County Council, given what will undoubtedly be the profound and devastating impact of the Government's education tax?
The changes that we're looking to make to remove the exemptions for private schools will be used to fund more teachers in our state sector. They will be used to create the inclusive mainstream education that we know every child deserves.
Ben Goldsborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. SEND provision in Conservative-run Norfolk has collapsed after years of adversarial mismanagement by the County Council. I welcome the steps that my honourable friend has taken so far. Can she commit to recognising the value of co-production to ensure SEND family voices are valued and money is spent wisely?
Yeah, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I have been very clear, and we are very clear, that this is reform and a journey that we want to go on with all of those who are looking to support our children and our families, whether that's teachers, school staff more broadly, education professionals, health professionals, local authorities. Everybody wants this to work better, and we need to work together to achieve it.
Very young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Data for autumn 2023, spring 2024 shows that more than a third of children with an EHC plan were persistently absent, more than double the rate for pupils without identified SEND. Persistent absence is a very complex issue and a multifaceted approach is needed to tackle the problem. In the light of this damning report from the National Audit Office, does the Minister agree that we cannot have parents facing prosecution for the failings of the system? And will she explain how she will work across government to ensure that parents of children with SEND can be sure that their children will get the support they need to attend school safely and receive the education they deserve?
Mr. Speaker, this government has inherited an absence epidemic in this country. Last year, 1 in 5 children were persistently absent from school, missing a day every fortnight or the latest, every fortnight or more. We know that strong foundations are rooted in attendance at school. You cannot receive an outstanding, excellent education that unlocks opportunities if you are not in school. But I recognise the challenge that the Honourable Lady has set out, and it is so important that we work together to create this inclusive mainstream education system to which every child wants to attend and feels they belong and gets those opportunities unlocked for them, as every child in this country should.
Lola McAvoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for a statement on this damning report on SEND. Last week, the Minister and the Secretary of State visited my constituency of Darlington. We went to Mount Pleasant Primary, a shining example of inclusive, mainstream SEND provision in the state sector. Does the Minister agree with me and the teachers there that children with physical conditions and disabilities could be referred for EHCPs by their GPs much earlier on, so they could arrive at school with everything they need in place, ready to excel in their education?
I thank my honourable friend for her question, and it was a wonderful visit to her school in her constituency, and was one of the many examples we know where the inclusive mainstream education is being provided, and that is what we need to see in schools in every community and available to every child. She rightly recognises some of the challenges between coordinating between health services and education provision, and the vital importance that these systems work together to achieve the outcomes for children. And I will certainly take away the specific suggestion she makes and share it with my colleagues in the Health Department.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parents in my constituency are not interested in what the Minister thinks about the Conservative Party, and they may recall that EHCPs were introduced under the coalition government. They want us to work together to make things better, and we all know that there's a problem with EHCPs, which have led to a tripling of costs for county councils. In the Westminster Hall debate that she took part in with me recently, she was much more constructive than she was today, and I'd like to believe that that's the approach that she'd like to take to the issue. So can she tell us if she has a timescale which she will set for the reform of the HCPs?
I appreciate the honourable gentleman's comments, and I will always work with cross-party colleagues to achieve the best for all of our children in this country. But where the blame for the current situation is being laid at a government of 5 months old is something that cannot be accepted or underestimated in terms of the inheritance that we have taken on. So we will continue to try and to work to put right what has been failed on for the last 14 years, and we are moving at pace to do that. All the work that we are doing in the Department for Education is towards that end, and we will make specific suggestions in terms of legislative changes and any other changes that need to be made from a systemic nature in due course.
Laura Kirk-Smith.
Many concerned parents wrote to me at the start of term because they had finally been given a school place for their children with special educational needs, but they had no transport to get their child to and from school. Will the Minister reassure my constituents that we will take measures to ensure that every child with special educational needs has a reliable and safe means of getting to and from the school that their child has been put in? Thank you.
Transport to school is the responsibility of the local authority, and families do need to work with their local authority to ensure that where they are placed in terms of school, that they are not disadvantaged in terms of the ability to get there by transport. I appreciate that this is a challenge. We have a transport system that too is in crisis after 14 years of Conservative government, but we will continue to work across government to make sure that all of our public services meet the needs of families, and but in the interim her constituents should work with the local authority to ensure the transport that they need for their education needs are met.
Callum Miller.
Zach is 9 years old. He's one of dozens of children in my constituency of Bicester and Woodstock who've been failed by the SEND system. Zach was traumatised by his experience in an inappropriate school setting, causing his learning to regress and both of his parents to have to stop work. Oxfordshire County Council has an accumulated high needs deficit of £56 million due to inadequate funding that failed families like Zach's. Has the Minister pressed the Treasury to increase that funding and to maintain the statutory override in next week's budget?
He tempts me into commentary on next week's budget, which I cannot indulge him in.
Julia Mims.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I speak here today both as a parent whose child was badly failed under the last government in terms of SEND provision, and as a MP whose surgeries have been visited on every single occasion by a parent who is struggling not just to get an EHCP, but to get the flexibility in place from their school that matches their child's need. So I would ask respectfully that members of the opposition, that until and unless you have walked in my shoes and the shoes of your constituents, and this includes the Shadow Secretary of State, that you show a little humility and decorum in how you respond on this issue. But I would ask the Minister if she could encourage schools in the review to be more flexible in how they provide that provision to children who need it.
And just say, when you say you mean me, and I don't want responsibility. Don't worry, Minister.
My honourable friend speaks with great passion and compassion for her constituents, and I agree with everything that she said. And I would reiterate that what she outlines is very epitome of what we are seeking to achieve in terms of inclusive mainstream education that can meet the needs of the vast majority of children with special educational needs and disabilities in our country.
Blackman.
Speaker. Children with special educational needs in Harrow face long journeys to get to the schools they need in order to deal with their problems. The last government actually recognised this and set up on a cross-party basis with the 3 MPs in the area, the council, all the head teachers agreed that there was a need for a new special educational needs school in Harrow. The site's been acquired, but since the general election, everything's gone very quiet. Now, I don't expect the Minister to actually give us an update here and now, but will she undertake to review the position and come back to the 3 MPs and to the Council to make sure we provide this school for the benefit of the children of Harrow?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and he is absolutely right to identify the significant transport that's required currently for children to meet their needs. Obviously, the way we wish to address that is to ensure that there is inclusive mainstream education available in every community for every child, and we are working at pace to achieve that. And indeed, in terms of the special schools, that is under review, and we will report back as soon as possible.
Mike Amesbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What more can the Minister do, working with other ministerial colleagues, to ensure that integrated care boards such as Cheshire and Warrington meet their part of the statutory obligation of 20 weeks in terms of EHCPs?
Thank you. My honourable friend is right to highlight the need for the Department for Education and the Department for Health and all those working to provide the services that we know children and families rely on, work together to achieve that. And I will take his question away and feed it back to my colleagues in the Department for Health.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to raise the issue of children being off-rolled and put into alternative provision. I speak not only as an MP but also as a parent that this has happened to, and I have a constituency meeting on Saturday where this is the subject. Is the Minister aware that children who are put in alternative provision are only entitled to 15 hours a week of education, and there is absolutely no way they can recover and go on to achieve properly on 15 hours a week? Can I ask the Minister to consider how that fits in with the new curriculum plan?
Yes, absolutely. This is we're looking at the system in the round, and that includes ensuring we have inclusive mainstream education, making sure we have schools that are required to work with their local authorities on admissions, on off-rolling, to ensure that we have the provision within communities that children rely on, and where there is special schools or alternative provision required, to make sure that that is an important opportunity for young people to break down the barriers for them, and ideally the vast majority of children can go back into the mainstream system as part of that inclusive mainstream provision. But I will take away the specific query that she raised, and this is an issue that we are looking at as part of the wider system.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know from families in Aldsbury, Oakham and other parts of my constituency just what a SEND crisis the last government left us with. Even when children finally get their EHCPs, parents still feel like they're having to fight for every bit of support that they need. We can't fix this overnight, but can the Minister set out what steps she's taking to give families in Sandwell some hope that things are going to change?
Whilst this question today has come about from a damning report from the National Audit Office that sets and lays bare the huge challenge that is faced in this area, my main purpose in wanting to respond to this today and actually being grateful for the opportunity to talk about this today is that I want to restore hope for families, that this is a priority for this government and that we are determined to fix it, and that should hopefully give hope to the constituents that she serves.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a recent visit to a school in my Birmingham constituency, it was put to me that not all schools fully participate in dealing with special needs children. and my casework over the years would substantiate that. What efforts is the Minister making to ensure that all schools participate fully?
The honourable gentleman is right to identify that all schools are part of solving this huge challenge that we know far too many children and families face, and that is why we've made the changes that we have to Ofsted that are still in progress in terms of how a school is assessed by Ofsted. That's why we're looking at the curriculum and assessment review. That's why we're looking at attendance measures. That's why we're looking at local authority cooperation with schools to make sure that all schools within a local area can work together to ensure that inclusive mainstream education is available for all.
Sam Rushworth.
Mr. Speaker. A mother in my constituency came to see me. Her son has been off-rolled from mainstream primary school, where she would like him to attend, and offered only a distant special school that's entirely inappropriate for his needs. She'd like to know why Durham County Council is prepared to spend £30,000 a year on transport for her son to attend a school that she doesn't feel is appropriate for him, but would not spend the same on a classroom assistant that could help him to be in mainstream school. It's under rules introduced by the previous government. I wonder if the Minister would meet with me to discuss this.
I would be happy to meet with the honourable gentleman. He outlines just one example of how this system is broken and it needs to be fixed.
Jess Brownfellow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parents and children in Chichester have lost confidence in the SEND system, with families effectively pitted against each other and Conservative-led West Sussex County Council, which only delivered 10% of their EHCPs this year within the 20-week statutory framework. Does the Minister agree with me that is unacceptable, and will she meet with me and other West Sussex MPs to discuss this specific issue that West Sussex County Council seem to have?
She outlines how the system is broken. We know it's broken, we want to fix it, and I'm happy to work with colleagues across the House in order to do that, so we'll be happy to meet with her as she suggests.
Debbie Abrahams.
Mr. Speaker, this damning report will come as no surprise to too many families across Oldham and Saddleworth. But given that we know that there is a nearly 20% difference between SEND children being in education and training and non-SEND children, what are we doing to ensure that SEND provision support is in foundation apprenticeships?
The Honourable Lady raises an important point, and I think it goes to highlight that not only is this system creating stress, it is failing far too many children and families, but it is also not creating the outcomes that we want every child to see, including those with special educational needs and disabilities. She raises an important point, and one that I will raise with my colleague in the Department of Health with responsibility for apprenticeships.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday afternoon, I arranged a meeting alongside my right honourable friends for East Hampshire and Godalming and Ash with parents, governors and teachers of independent schools, and they were unanimous that imposing an education tax partway through an academic year will have disastrous impacts for every child's education, but especially those with special educational needs. So can I ask the Minister, what assessment has she made on the impact of their education tax on the caseload of EHCPs and the capacity of local authorities like Surrey and Hampshire to meet them?
The Treasury will be producing its impact assessment as part of the normal course of implementing a new taxation, and he can refer to that once it's published.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been working with parents with children with SEND for a number of months now, and they talk to me about the experience that their children have had in mainstream schools and the fact that the support has not been what it should be, even though they are looking for an inclusive education for their children. Can the Minister outline what support mainstream schools might need in the near future in order to provide that truly inclusive education to so many children who have been let down?
My honourable friend raises an important point, and it is right that we require schools to provide that inclusive mainstream education, and that we put the workforce, the training and all the support necessary so that that can be delivered. That is why it is one of our priorities to ensure we have 6,500 more teachers within our teaching system, to ensure we have the specialist teachers that every child should have, and we're looking at sort of training and special educational needs and disabilities, additional training support to ensure it's already rolled out for the early years, and we want to ensure that all schools have access to high quality training to support them to meet this need.
Just a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Demand for EHCPs for children in Somerset has tripled in 6 years, and the county's SEND budget is forecast to be in deficit by £290 million in the next 5 years. Previously, Somerset spent on average £22,000 per child with an EHCP. Now that's £18,000. So it's not overspending, it's the increasing number of children needing help. As a start, could the Minister have a look at the current legislation, which lacks clear definitions of which children should be assessed or funded, and this ambiguity, especially post-COVID, has led to a huge and rapid increase in the number of children needing support.
The Honourable Lady raised an important point, and obviously we will be looking at the system as a whole and any legislation that needs to be amended or brought in order to achieve the vision that we have for an inclusive mainstream education that not only provides that education for all children, regardless of their special education needs and disabilities, but will provide those specialist places for those with the most complex needs that can't be met within the mainstream education system. And we know the evidence shows that where those needs are being met within the mainstream inclusive education system, that the need for EHCPs is significantly reduced.
Helen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last year alone, my local authority of North East Lincolnshire spent £1.3 million sending 114 children out of area for special education needs settings. Could she reassure constituents across North East Lincolnshire, in my constituency of Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, that the actions that she is taking is not only going to support local authorities and reduce these additional costs, but provide the kind of education that their children need closer to home?
The Honourable Lady sets out very well the vision that we are seeking to achieve for all children, and that is the purpose of all of the changes that we're making within our education system to ensure that inclusive mainstream education is available to all children, and that there are specialist places for children with the most complex needs.
Ms. Greg-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With more and more children requiring SEND provision, the scale of the challenge is undoubtedly a large one. The previous Conservative government did offer a beacon of hope for children in Buckinghamshire, with the previous Secretary of State confirming funding for a new SEND school in the county. So can the Minister confirm, are those funds still secure? Is Buckinghamshire getting that new SEND school or not?
So as he is aware, we are looking at the whole system in the round, making sure that we have the inclusive mainstream provision that the vast majority of children will not only benefit from but do better in, and that we do have those specialist places where they are needed, and we're working at pace to ensure that we have the right places for the children that need them as fast as we can.
Grant Snell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I draw the House's attention to my registered interest as a governor of a special educational needs school. The Minister, Mr. Speaker, has rightly pointed out the failure of the system in SEN over many, many years, but I think it's important that we recognise the Herculean effort made by teachers and support staff in schools, and it is not those individuals that have failed young people. So could I ask the Minister to outline further to her answer to my friend from South Norfolk how she will engage with representative bodies of teachers and support staff in schools to make sure they're included in the rescue plan?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. We in government cannot deliver any of this change that we want to see. It will be delivered by the teachers, it will be delivered by the support staff, by the education professionals and health professionals in our system, and he is absolutely right to draw attention to their valiant efforts in a system that has been letting them and the children and families that they serve down, and we will be legislating to bring in the school staff support negotiating body to make sure that the support staff within our schools that are the lifeblood of so many of so much of what is provided to our children have their voice as part of the national conversation.
Sarah Dyke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Somerset has the third highest rate of school exclusions and the second highest rate of suspensions in England for children with SEND. So does the Minister agree with today's National Audit Office report confirming that the government must develop a whole system approach to ensure the most vulnerable students in Glastonbury and Somerton get the education that they deserve?
I absolutely can agree with the National Audit Office. Whilst it is a damning report, we recognise much of what it says within it and are determined to fix it and put it right in the way she suggests.
Andy McNay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. SEND is the single greatest issue faced in schools in my constituency. At the same time, I've had far too many heartbreaking conversations with families not getting the support that they need. So would she agree with me that early intervention, supportive early intervention and diagnosis is the single most effective way of reducing this demand and ensuring better outcomes? Yeah.
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. Early diagnosis, early intervention is known to significantly improve the chances of children with special educational needs and disabilities in terms of their opportunities and outcomes. But most of all, one of the biggest challenges in this space is the challenges that many families face in battling a system that is letting them down, and that is something we are determined to change.
Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Special needs education has been underfunded by the previous government, affecting many families in my Wokingham constituency, and I know that the government has been left with a £22 billion hole in the country's finances. But will the Minister ensure there is an increase in funding for SEND education in the local authorities' local government settlement at the end of this year?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question and recognise the challenge that he raises, but he does tempt me into anticipating the budget statement next week, but we recognise the challenge that many local authorities are facing and are very alive to those concerns.
Jane Kirkham.
Speaker, the adversarial system has caused such damage and upset. Could the Minister confirm that she will look towards a system where expectations are clear and co-produced, and also look at the funding formula more generally, as some places have far less high needs and direct funding for students than others, even though the distances they have to cover are much further?
Yeah.
She raises a number of issues in that question, and I fear we're running out of time to give them the response that they deserve, and I would be happy to respond in writing in more detail, because she does raise some important issues and ones that we are determined to address.
Taylor.
Projections show a cumulative deficit of over £4 billion on educational balance sheets by 2026. And the override mechanism ending, which will allocate those deficits to council balance sheets. This is a pending disaster for local authorities. A report suggests it will push 43% into bankruptcy. The report's conclusion is that if unreformed, the SEND system is financially unsustainable, yet we've not heard meaningful plans for reform. Will the Minister take this opportunity to commit to the national body for SEND that the Liberal Democrats included in their manifesto, which will end the postcode lottery, ensure funding for higher needs students and address the urgent funding crisis for local government?
He's right that the National Audit Office has identified that the system is currently unsustainable. And not only is it financially unsustainable, but it is not sustainable for the children and their families that are being let down. We are determined to fix this in government and are working at pace to do so.
Alan Thompson.
A whole 10% of my constituency casework in Erewash relates to SEND provision. So I recently issued a public letter to Conservative Derbyshire County Council expressing my deep concern over the state of their provision, as many affected families feel voiceless. Will the Minister explain what the steps the government will take to ensure that councils like Derbyshire County Council actually fulfil their responsibilities to children and their families?
We know that councils are at the forefront of seeking to meet the needs of children and their families where they have special educational needs and disabilities, and are being let down by a system that is broken and the National Audit Office shows is completely unsustainable. So we will work at pace in government and working with teachers, parents, schools, school support staff, the health service and local authorities to ensure that children get the opportunities they deserve.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Devon County Council projects an overspend on special educational needs of £38.5 million. And this is explained partly by additional travel costs in rural areas like mine in Mid and East Devon. The last Conservative government threatened that such an overspend would put at risk the so-called safety valve for Devon. How will the Minister help enable good quality SEND support to be delivered closer to home?
The Honourable Gentleman is right that the solution to many of these challenges is to create that inclusive mainstream education in every community so that every child can benefit and thrive from it.
Andrew Cooper.
Parents want the best for their children, schools want to deliver the best for their children, and local authorities want to provide the best for their children. But the system sets everybody up to fail. It's adversarial instead of being person-centred, and it actively incentivises bad outcomes. I'm pleased to hear her views on that we need to rebuild the system from the ground up. But would she agree with me that that needs to go hand in hand with rebuilding child and adolescent mental health and improving the speed of diagnosis for autism and ADHD? And will she commit to working with my Right Honourable Friend, the Secretary of State for Health, to deliver that?
I think the Honourable Gentleman made the case very well in his question, and I agree that we need to work at pace to improve the mental health support that's available for young people, to improve the availability of educational psychologists, and to work across government, including with colleagues in the Department for Health, to make sure that we are unlocking opportunity for all.
James Shum.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for her answers to the questions and always trying to be helpful, Minister. Mavilla High School in my constituency of Stamford has increased its enrolments from 402 to 600. Pupils because staff have worked hard, but also because the Education Authority support has enabled the school to extend the specialist provision for pupils with autism to include 10 and 11-year-olds. And it established what is called 2 nurture classes in the mainstream. So does the Minister not agree that without additional funding to create SEND units within mainstream for the pupils who need support, that is indeed a way forward? And would the Minister consider that and as a suggestion to make life better? Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman who characteristically is always constructive in his contributions, and I thank him for that, and I'm more than happy to take away his suggestion and consider it as part of our wider reform of this system.
Catherine Atkins.
There are over 20 cases in my constituency of children with special educational needs and disabilities who are missing out on care and school placements that I'm meeting the Council about tomorrow. Can I thank the Minister for speaking with me this week about the concerns of families, and can we make it a priority to help local authorities to offer these children the best possible placements?
I thank the Honourable Lady. I wish her well in her meeting tomorrow. We know the challenges in their system. They're laid bare in the National Audit Office report, but I think there is no shortage of will in this House, right across the House, to get this right and to put this system right. I must reiterate as we draw to the end of these questions, though, that it will take patience, because there is no quick fix to the situation that we have inherited, but we are determined to fix it, and we will do so on an ongoing basis and as quickly as possible.
Dave Robertson.
Saxon Hill Academy in my constituency does amazing work supporting young people between the ages of 2 and 19 with physical disabilities and complex needs. But for many of the students there, Saxon Hill is much more than a school. It is literally a home away from home due to its sleepover club, which allows pupils to stay at the school overnight 1 night per week. The funding for this provision was extended for 2 years in December last year. So can she assure me that as part of the government SEND review, we will look at sustainable funding for additional provisions such as this?
My honourable friend raises an important point, and yes, we need to move to a more sustainable footing in the longer term and make sure that councils are able to plan ahead, and that is something we are looking at.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An entire generation in Milton Keynes of children with SEND needs has been let down by the previous government. In addition, the cuts to local councils and schools has made the situation much worse, particularly with high-level teaching assistants, who are absolutely crucial to making sure there's early detection and that ongoing support for children with SEND in mainstream education. Can the Minister ensure that those school support staff that do that important work are included in that essential review to support the children in Milton Keynes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always very careful to say that we thank and applaud the teachers in our schools, but we thank and applaud the incredible support staff that not only support teachers in their role, but ensure every school can function, work and provide those opportunities that we know will ensure all children can thrive.
That completes the UQ, but just to say to all the Chamber, I think it was a very important issue. I do not think there is a constituency that's not affected. Thanks for the Minister and thanks for all the contributions. It's certainly on the record now. Let the front benches change over.